what we're going to do now is, at this point, you've pretty much learned a lot about Mongo and Mongoose and using it in Node. And I can promise you, like you know enough to like build an app in Mongo and Mongoose. Like you can get to the point. If it starts crapping the bed because it's not scaling, that's a whole nother thing. But you could definitely get to the point where this thing can host like over 1 million people easily with what you just learned. So with that in mind, the next thing I want to do is show you how to actually use Mongo in an app. Like we've been doing all these tests and all these isolated queries and creations and getting those things to pass. It'd be really cool to just like, okay, well, how do I actually use this inside of an app? Like, how does this work? And you'd be surprised it's like the same thing. Nothing really changes. So what I want to do is I want to spend just a little bit of time of hooking up like a basic Hello World app using Express and showing you how Mongo could tie into it. It could tie into it so many different ways, but just showing you one way of how that would work, and then just set you loose and have you fix some of that on your own. Sound good? All right, so what we're going to do is I'm just going to come in here and test.js again. I'm just going to blow all this out. Just don't really need it. All right, so, well, we're going to create a small server. I'm not going to talk too much about the implementation of what I'm doing. It's going to be small. We're going to do it all in one file. But what's important is we're going to focus on the controllers of a server, and that's where the database stuff is going to happen. So that's where you're going to be looking into what's happening with Mongo and Mongoose is the controllers. And the exercise is the only thing you're focused on is the controllers. So you don't have to really worry about the specifics of this. This is just a practical example of how you actually use this database in an application today to get started. So I'm just going to use a package called Express, which is a very good package. I use it all the time in Node to create a server. And Express is pretty simple. If you've used Express before, you know what I'm doing. If you don't know what I'm doing, I'm just going to be talking about it as I go, but we're not going to be diving deep into Express. We have a course for that already on Front-End Masters. Check that one out if you don't know about Express and a little more deeper dive into it. But basically, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some routes that I can hit from an API, and then those routes are just going to run database operations when they're activated. That's it. That's all Express is going to help me do. So first thing I need to do is just set up some middleware. Again, you won't have to do any of this in your exercise. And middleware is very similar to what you've been doing in Mongo itself. So this middleware is just to help us debug some things. So again, if you want to follow along, feel free. If you already know Express, this is probably not that big of a deal. Body parser. Okay, so let's set up some logging so we can see some logging here and make sure we can actually post some stuff here. And then make sure this works. Okay, so now that I got the middleware set up, now I'm just going to add some routes. So let's say we want to be able to, let's say we have an API server that gets notes. It's a note-taking app. And we want to be able to get our notes and we want to be able to create notes. So how would you do that in something like Node or Express? It's pretty simple. So in your server framework of choice, we're using Express, you would just define a route. So in our case, we're going to say, I want to do a GET request to, let's just say, notes. So that'll give me all my notes. And then from there, I'm just going to run a function. This function is literally like everything you've been doing all day today. This is where you're going to do your database stuff. The only difference is after you do your database stuff, you have to respond to the request. That's it. So inside of here, this is where you would use your Mongo stuff. So how you get it in here is totally up to you. Most of the time, you'll have your models in another file. We're doing everything in one file now, but you have them in another file, just like we do in all of our exercises. And then you'll just require them, right? And then you'll start using them in here. Some people put their controllers, these functions are called controllers, inside of their own file that use models. So there's many different patterns, but for this example, I'm just going to put everything in one file. So I'm just going to make a new model right now. I'm going to call it a schema, or I'm sorry, a note. So I'm saying I'm going to make a note schema, which equals a new Mongoose schema. And a note just has like a title, that's a string, and it's required. and it's unique. And then it has a body. Super simple note. Its type is a string. Oops. And we can put some validation like min length of 10. So that's our note schema. Now we need to make a note model. So I'll just call this note equals mongoose dot model notes note schema. Cool. So now we have a schema. We have our note model. We can start using this in our API. So I want to be able to get all the notes. So first thing I'll do is I'll query the database for all the notes. So I'll make this async. And I'll just say notes equals await note.find all of them. Cool. So I got all the notes, and then the rest is just framework specific stuff. So for Express, I set the status code to 200, and then I send back some JSON as notes. And then there we go. That's it. That's how you would create an API server that grabs all the notes from a database using something like Express. It's pretty simple. I mean, this control is literally 2 lines of code. Yeah, in the real application, you would have like way more logic, like checking permissions, and you probably wouldn't check the whole collection of notes and send them back. It'd be based off some user ID or something like that. But you can see it's pretty simple.